Most people believe influence comes from speaking more, proving more, or being more visible. That belief is wrong. And it is the reason most people are ignored, overlooked, or quietly dismissed. The truth is simpler, and more uncomfortable. Influence does not begin with your voice. It begins with how you think. Before anyone trusts your words, they sense your internal state. Before they follow your direction, they feel your certainty, or your confusion. Most people never learn this. They try to sound confident without becoming calm. They try to persuade without understanding themselves. They try to lead while still reacting emotionally to everything around them. This training exists to correct that. This is not motivation. It is not inspiration. It is not performance. It is mental discipline. Average people speak to release tension. Professionals speak to create outcomes. Average people think emotionally and speak impulsively. Leaders think deliberately, then speak with precision. Most people mistake influence for dominance. They raise their voice. They over-explain. They fill silence with noise. Real influence is quieter than that. It is slower. It is heavier. You have already felt it before. A person enters a room and says very little. Yet others adjust. The energy shifts. Decisions move in their direction. That is not charisma. That is not luck. That is internal alignment expressed externally. Influence is not something you add to yourself. It is something you remove obstacles from. This audiobook will train you to do that. There is a hard truth most people avoid. Your current level of influence is an exact reflection of your internal order. If your thoughts are scattered, your words feel weak. If your emotions control you, others sense instability. If you seek approval, your presence shrinks. People do not respond to what you say. They respond to who you are being while you say it. This is why intelligent people are often ignored. Why loud people are often ineffective. Why calm individuals quietly rise. Professionals understand something most people never examine. Thinking precedes speaking. Speaking precedes power. This training will not teach you how to impress. It will teach you how to stabilize yourself, so others naturally trust your direction. You will learn how influence actually works at the psychological level. Not tricks. Not manipulation. Not scripts. But structure. There are a few foundational principles you must understand before we proceed. First principle: presence outweighs persuasion. Before words matter, your nervous system communicates safety or threat. Calm invites trust. Urgency creates resistance. Second principle: clarity creates authority. People follow those who reduce confusion, not those who add complexity. If your thinking is precise, your language carries weight. Third principle: silence is not emptiness. It is a tool. Used correctly, it creates space for others to project importance onto you. Fourth principle: emotional control is not suppression. It is mastery. You do not eliminate emotion. You place it under command. Fifth principle: influence compounds through consistency. Not intensity. Not moments. But disciplined repetition. This audiobook is designed to reshape how you think before you speak. How you speak before you act. And how you act without needing validation. You will notice something as you listen. There will be no hype. No dramatic promises. No emotional spikes. That is intentional. This training mirrors the mindset it builds. Calm. Grounded. Deliberate. You are not here to be entertained. You are here to be trained. Each chapter will adjust a specific internal mechanism. Your thinking patterns. Your emotional responses. Your communication habits. Your sense of self. You will not be asked to do many things. You will be asked to do a few things correctly. And repeatedly. This is how professionals are built. As you move through this audiobook, do not rush. Do not multitask. Do not consume passively. Listen as someone preparing to carry responsibility. Listen as someone refining their internal posture. You are not becoming louder. You are becoming steadier. You are not learning to convince. You are learning to position. By the end of this training, you will not feel motivated. You will feel settled, clear, unrushed, and people will respond differently to you, not because you demand it, but because you no longer need it. This is the work. Quiet, intentional, precise. Take a breath. Slow your pace. Let your attention settle. We begin with the power you already have, the one you've been using unconsciously. And now, you will learn to use it deliberately. Chapter 1. The invisible power you already have. You cannot influence others until you understand the power you are already projecting. Most people believe influence is something you acquire later. With confidence. With status. With experience. That assumption is inaccurate. Influence is not something you turn on. It is something you are already emitting, whether you intend to or not. Every person influences the emotional and psychological environment around them. The only difference is whether that influence is deliberate or accidental. Most people influence unintentionally. And because it is unconscious, it is often weak, inconsistent, or counterproductive. This chapter will correct that. The most common failure pattern is simple. People confuse influence with performance. They believe influence is persuasion, or charm, or assertiveness. So they speak more. They explain more. They justify more. They attempt to push ideas outward without stabilizing what is happening internally. As a result, their words feel busy. Their presence feels uncertain. Their authority dissolves the moment resistance appears. They are not lacking intelligence. They are lacking internal order. Most people speak as a reaction to discomfort. Silence makes them uneasy. Disagreement triggers defensiveness. Uncertainty pushes them to overtalk. This is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system habit. The human brain is wired to reduce tension quickly. Speech becomes a release valve. Words become a coping mechanism. That is why people often speak without clarity. They are not trying to influence. They are trying to feel safe. This is where influence actually begins, not in language, but in regulation. Influence is the ability to remain internally stable while shaping external outcomes. When your internal state is calm, others feel it. When your thinking is ordered, others sense it. When your emotions are contained, people trust your direction. This happens before you say anything. Presence is not mystical. It is neurological. Human beings constantly scan for signals of safety, certainty, and competence. Tone of voice, pacing, eye contact, stillness. Before words are processed logically, the nervous system decides whether to relax or resist. This is the psychology of perception. People do not first hear what you say. They feel how you are. If your energy is rushed, people become guarded. If your posture is uncertain, your words lose weight. If your thinking is scattered, your message fragments. This is why thinking precedes speaking, and speaking precedes power. Your thinking determines your emotional state. Your emotional state determines your delivery. Your delivery determines how your words are received. Power does not come from convincing others. It comes from being internally settled enough that others follow without pressure. Everyday influence happens constantly, quietly, and often unnoticed. A calm person slows the room. A focused person brings clarity. A grounded person reduces conflict. You have seen this before. In meetings, there is often one person who speaks less but shifts direction more. In conversations, there is someone whose pauses carry more weight than others' explanations. In families, workplaces, or communities, there are individuals people instinctively defer to. Not because they are loud. Not because they demand it. But because their presence feels anchored. These people are not performing influence. They are embodying it. They are not trying to control outcomes. They are controlling themselves. This is the invisible power you already have. Even now, you influence environments. Through your pace. Through your attention. Through your emotional tone. If you are anxious, you spread it. If you are impatient, others feel pressured. If you are grounded, people relax. Influence does not begin when you speak. It begins when you enter a space. The mistake most people make is trying to fix their communication before stabilizing their cognition. They work on what to say. They ignore how they think. But thinking is the first layer of influence. When your thinking is reactive, your speech is defensive. When your thinking is strategic, your speech becomes deliberate. Professionals do not rush to express. They pause to assess. They are not withholding. They are orienting. They understand that the fastest way to lose power is to speak without internal alignment. The difference between average people and leaders is not confidence. It is containment. Leaders contain their reactions. They slow their internal tempo. They allow silence without discomfort. This containment creates gravity. Here is the metaphor that anchors this chapter. Influence is like gravity. You do not see it. You feel its pull. Objects with mass do not chase. They attract. When you are internally stable, you gain mass. Your words land heavier. Your presence bends attention toward you. When you are internally scattered, you become light. Your words float away. Your influence dissipates. The practical control shift begins here. Stop using speech to manage emotion. When you feel the impulse to explain, justify, or fill silence, pause. Do nothing for one full breath. That breath is not passive. It is a reset. It interrupts reactivity. It recenters thinking. It returns control to you. You are not delaying communication. You are upgrading it. This single behavior changes everything. You begin to speak from clarity instead of tension. From intention instead of impulse. And something subtle happens. People start leaning in. They listen differently. They respond with more respect. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence feels composed. This is not a technique. It is a standard. You are no longer someone who speaks to be seen. You are someone whose presence is felt before words are needed. This is who you are becoming. And this is only the beginning. Chapter 2: Reprogramming Your Thinking for Influence. You do not speak with authority if you do not think with authority first. Most people attempt to influence at the surface level. They adjust their words. They rehearse phrases. They imitate confidence. But influence does not originate in language. It originates in belief. Not belief as optimism. Belief as assumption. Every person carries internal assumptions about themselves, others, and the world. These assumptions quietly shape posture, tone, pacing, and presence. Long before words appear. The most common failure pattern is invisible to the person experiencing it. People believe their thoughts are neutral. They are not. Thoughts are directional. They either stabilize you or destabilize you. Many people operate from beliefs they have never examined. I need to prove myself. If I pause, I will look unsure. I must respond quickly to stay relevant. Authority comes from being certain about everything. These beliefs weaken influence before a single word is spoken. They create internal pressure. Pressure speeds thinking. Speed fragments clarity. As a result, speech becomes reactive. Tone tightens. Presence shrinks. The listener feels it, even if they cannot explain it. This is not about intelligence. It is about conditioning. Human beings are trained from an early age to respond quickly. to answer immediately, to avoid silence, to equate speed with competence. This training creates reactive thinking. Reactive thinking is stimulus-based. Something happens. You respond. It feels automatic, urgent, compelling, but it is rarely influential. Reactive thinking pulls attention outward. Strategic thinking pulls attention inward first. Reactive thinkers speak to relieve discomfort. Strategic thinkers pause to clarify intent. This difference is everything. Psychologically, reactive thinking is driven by threat detection. The nervous system scans for danger, social rejection, judgment, loss of status. Speech becomes a defensive maneuver. Strategic thinking operates from safety. The nervous system is regulated. Attention is stable. From this state, thinking slows. Words become precise. Decisions align with outcomes rather than emotions. Beliefs shape perception. If you believe you are being evaluated, you will perform. If you believe you are orienting others, you will lead. If you believe authority must be asserted, you will push. If you believe authority is assumed, you will speak calmly. Others respond not to your words, but to the belief beneath them. This is why two people can say the same sentence and receive completely different reactions. One is speaking from self-doubt. The other from internal certainty. The sentence is identical. The impact is not. Professionals reprogram their thinking by questioning their assumptions. They do not ask, "What should I say?" They ask, "What is actually needed here?" They do not rush to answer. They assess context. They choose position. They understand that influence is not about having more thoughts. It is about having fewer, clearer ones. Here is the metaphor for this chapter. Your mind is a command center, not a debate hall. In a debate hall, every voice speaks at once. Arguments collide. Nothing moves forward. In a command center, signals are filtered. Noise is removed. Only relevant information remains. Influential thinkers run a command center. They notice internal chatter and do not obey it. They observe emotional spikes without reacting to them. They choose thoughts intentionally. The most damaging mental habit is internal commentary. The constant narration. I should say something. That didn't land well. I'm losing control of this conversation. This commentary fractures presence. It pulls attention inward in the wrong way. Not toward clarity, but toward self-monitoring. Strategic thinkers eliminate this habit. They replace commentary with orientation. Instead of narrating themselves, they observe the environment. They track energy. They notice pacing. They sense resistance or openness. Their attention is outward, but their center remains stable. This is how calm authority is built. The practical control shift in this chapter is precise. When you notice internal commentary, label it as noise, and return to intention. Not by fighting the thought. Not by analyzing it. Simply shift focus to one question. What is the outcome here? That question reorganizes thinking. It moves you from reaction to strategy. From emotion to structure. From self-consciousness to clarity. Your inner dialogue becomes quieter. Your speech becomes cleaner. Over time, a new belief forms. I do not need to rush. This belief changes everything. Your tone slows. Your posture settles. Your words gain weight. This is not positive thinking. It is disciplined thinking. You are training your mind to support influence, not sabotage it. This is not something you do occasionally. It is something you become consistent with. You are no longer someone who reacts to mental noise. You are someone who directs attention deliberately. This is not a technique you apply. It is an identity you adopt. You think before you speak. You choose before you respond. You lead from internal order. This is who you are now becoming. Chapter 3. Thinking in Outcomes, Not Emotions. You cannot lead outcomes if your thinking is governed by emotion. Most people believe emotions provide truth. They do not. They provide information, but only when interpreted correctly. The common failure pattern is emotional authorship. People allow how they feel to decide what they say, how they say it, and when they act. When they feel disrespected, they react. When they feel uncertain, they over-explain. When they feel pressured, they rush. They believe authenticity means emotional expression. In reality, it often produces instability. This does not make people weak. It makes them predictable. Emotionally driven thinking follows a pattern. Trigger. Reaction. Justification. The moment emotion leads, credibility erodes. Others may sympathize. They may understand. But they do not trust direction that shifts with mood. This is why emotionally expressive people are often heard but rarely followed. The psychological explanation is rooted in survival wiring. Emotions evolved to produce fast responses, not accurate ones. They narrow focus. They prioritize immediacy. They sacrifice long-term clarity for short-term relief. When emotion dominates cognition, the brain switches to protection mode. Defensiveness increases. Perspective collapses. Language becomes sharp or scattered. The nervous system takes control of the narrative. This is not a flaw. It is biology. But influence requires more than biological reaction. It requires choice. Influential people understand this distinction clearly. They do not eliminate emotion. They decouple it from decision-making. Emotion is data. Outcome is direction. They allow themselves to feel, but they do not allow feeling to dictate behavior. This is the reframe. Leaders think in outcomes, not emotional narratives. They ask different internal questions. Not, how do I feel about this? But, what does this situation require? This shift is subtle but decisive. Instead of expressing frustration, they choose effectiveness. Instead of seeking validation, they aim for resolution. Instead of reacting to tone, they anchor to purpose. Calm replaces urgency. Precision replaces emotional discharge. This does not make them cold. It makes them trustworthy. Here is the metaphor that anchors this chapter. Emotion is weather. Outcome is navigation. You do not deny the weather. You adjust your route. If you let the storm decide where you go, you drift. If you acknowledge it and steer anyway, you arrive. Emotion tells you conditions exist. Outcome thinking tells you where to move regardless. The practical control shift is simple and trainable. When an emotional surge appears, pause internally and ask one question. What outcome am I responsible for right now? Not what you want to say. Not what feels fair. Not what would release tension. Only the outcome. Then speak or act in alignment with that outcome, even if emotion remains present. This trains separation. Emotion stays. Authority stays with you. Over time, your nervous system learns something critical. You are safe even without emotional expression. This reduces reactivity automatically. Your words slow down. Your tone steadies. Your credibility increases. This is where logic and emotional intelligence merge. Logic without emotional awareness becomes rigid. Emotion without logic becomes chaotic. Influence lives in integration. You acknowledge emotion internally. You choose logic externally. You communicate with clarity, not charge. People sense this immediately. They feel your steadiness. They trust your judgment. They stop testing your boundaries. This is not a technique you perform. It is a posture you maintain. You are no longer thinking to feel better. You are thinking to lead effectively. This is not suppression. It is command. And this is who you are becoming. Someone whose thinking is anchored to outcomes. Someone whose presence remains intact under pressure. Someone whose influence increases precisely because emotion no longer controls the wheel. This is not what you do. This is who you are now. Chapter 4. The Psychology of First Impressions. You are being evaluated before you are understood. This is not opinion. It is biology. The moment you enter a space, the human brain around you begins making rapid assessments. Not about your ideas. Not about your intelligence. But about your stability. This happens within seconds. Most people are unaware of this process, which is why they lose influence before they ever begin speaking. The common failure pattern is predictable. People believe first impressions are about appearance or charm. They focus on what to say. They rehearse introductions. They try to come across a certain way. As a result, they perform. They smile too quickly. They speak too soon. They move too much. They attempt to signal confidence, but what they project is effort. And effort is visible. This is why first impressions often fail. Not because people lack competence, but because they communicate internal tension. The psychology behind this is simple. The brain prioritizes safety over information. Before it processes words, it scans for cues of threat or reliability. This scan includes posture, movement speed, eye contact, vocal tone, and silence. Confidence is not read as dominance. It is read as nervous system regulation. When someone is calm, the brain relaxes. When someone is restless, the brain becomes alert. This has nothing to do with intention. It is automatic. Most people unknowingly broadcast urgency. They rush movements. They speak quickly. They fill pauses immediately. The brain interprets this as instability. Not danger, but uncertainty. And uncertainty weakens trust. Leaders and professionals operate differently. They understand that first impressions are less about action and more about restraint. They move deliberately. They speak when necessary. They allow silence to exist. This restraint communicates control. Body language is not about gestures. It is about stillness. Stillness signals that nothing is being chased. That nothing needs to be proven. When your body is calm, your mind is assumed to be clear. Tone of voice follows the same rule. Influential people speak slightly slower than average. Not artificially. Not dramatically. Just enough to signal that they are not rushed by the moment. A calm tone tells the listener, "I am not overwhelmed by this interaction." That single signal shifts power. Silence is the most misunderstood tool of influence. Most people treat silence as a problem to solve. They rush to eliminate it. But silence is not absence. It is space. And space creates authority. When you do not rush to fill silence, you allow others to adjust to you. They begin speaking more carefully. They reveal more. They orient themselves around your pace. This is not manipulation. It is leadership of tempo. Confidence without arrogance emerges here. Arrogance pushes outward. Confidence holds center. Arrogant people dominate space. Confident people stabilize it. There is no need to assert importance when it is already felt. Professionals do not try to impress in first moments. They aim to regulate. They become the calmest presence in the room. This is the reframe. First impressions are not about projecting value. They are about removing friction. When others feel at ease around you, they assign competence naturally. Here is the metaphor that anchors this chapter. Think of a deep body of water. Still water reflects clearly. Agitated water distorts everything. Your presence is the surface. When you are internally still, others see themselves clearly around you. They feel grounded. They trust the environment. When you are internally agitated, everything becomes unclear. The practical control shift is precise. When entering any interaction, pause your body before engaging. Stop moving for 1 second. Set your posture. Relax your shoulders. Breathe once through your nose. Then speak. This micropause resets your nervous system. It signals control before words appear. Do not rush greetings. Do not oversmile. Do not fill space. Let your presence arrive before your voice. This single adjustment changes how people perceive you within seconds. You are not performing confidence. You are embodying steadiness. This is not a social trick. It is internal discipline expressed externally. You are no longer someone who enters spaces seeking approval. You are someone whose calm sets the tone. This is who you are now. Chapter 5. Mastering the Art of Clear Thought. Clarity is not optional for those who wish to lead. It is the foundation of every decision, every word, and every action you take. Most people assume thinking clearly is natural. It is not. The human mind is prone to clutter, distraction, and overcomplication. If you fail to organize your thoughts, your influence collapses before it even begins. The most common failure pattern is overthinking. People believe that more analysis equals better decisions. They collect more information, consider more scenarios, and endlessly debate possibilities. In doing so, they trap themselves in paralysis. They confuse busyness with effectiveness. They confuse complexity with intelligence. They believe that if something is hard to explain, it must be valuable. The psychological reason for this is simple. The mind seeks control over uncertainty. When faced with unknowns, it multiplies thoughts in an attempt to anticipate outcomes. Fear masquerades as reasoning. Doubt disguises itself as thoroughness. This mental noise spreads into every interaction. Conversations become tangled. Emails lose focus. Decisions are delayed. Influential people behave differently. They resist the urge to overcomplicate. They reduce information to its essential components. They design thought as a structure, not a flood. Leaders approach complexity like a sculptor approaches marble. They chip away what is unnecessary. They reveal what matters. They do not create detail to impress others. They simplify to clarify. Here is the metaphor to anchor this chapter. Clear thought is like a river flowing over rocks. Water moves effortlessly because it finds the path of least resistance. Stones represent clutter, indecision, and noise. Remove the obstacles, or navigate around them, and clarity emerges naturally. The practical control shift is deceptively simple. When faced with a complex idea, identify the single essential point. Ask yourself, if I had to explain this in one sentence, what is it? Do not fall for the illusion that multiple qualifiers make you smarter. Do not let mental clutter masquerade as precision. Next, organize supporting details in layers. Primary point first. Context second. Examples last. This is the structure negotiators, leaders, and strategists use consistently. It ensures the mind is not overloaded. It allows others to follow effortlessly. Another control shift is to schedule thought intentionally. Set aside uninterrupted time for reflection. Silence the environment. Turn off devices. Force the mind to focus on the problem without distraction. Clarity emerges not from frantic thinking, but from deliberate reflection. The final piece of structured thinking is framing chaos as a set of controllable elements. Break problems into components. Prioritize what can be influenced. Discard what cannot. Influential people never respond to entire systems at once. They address the elements they can control. The rest they observe. This approach produces confidence because it replaces overwhelming uncertainty with measurable action. It transforms mental noise into actionable insight. Now, lock this identity in. You are not someone who reacts to complexity. You are someone who converts confusion into clarity. Your thoughts are not scattered, they are deliberately ordered. Your mind is not crowded, it is disciplined. When others are lost in tangles of overthinking, you are calm. When others are distracted, you are focused. When others are overwhelmed, you see the path forward. This is not a skill you occasionally use. It is who you are. You are a clear mind in a chaotic world. You are the river that flows smoothly over the obstacles, carrying ideas, decisions, and influence with precision. Every word you speak, every choice you make, begins here. In clarity, in structure, in disciplined thought. And from this foundation, influence becomes inevitable. You do not need to impress. You only need to think clearly. Everything else follows. Chapter 6. Speaking with authority, not volume. You cannot command respect through volume. Many people believe that a strong voice is a loud voice. They assume that the more decibels you project, the more authority you convey. This is a misconception. Loudness creates noise. Noise overwhelms focus. Noise forces people to react, not follow. True authority comes from control. Control of thought, control of breath, control of presence. It comes from measured delivery, deliberate pacing, and intentional silence. The common failure pattern is obvious. People rush their speech. They fill gaps with filler words, like to avoid discomfort. They over-explain, believing repetition equals influence. When stressed, they raise their voices or accelerate their pace. They confuse agitation with strength. Others hear tension, not certainty. And influence slips away. This happens because the nervous system equates urgency with danger. When we feel nervous, we speed up, hoping the other person will get it before we stumble. The result is scattered words and diluted impact. Professionals, however, behave differently. They speak with calm authority. They pace themselves intentionally. They pause where meaning needs to sink in. They do not rush. They allow their words to land fully. Consider this: every sentence you speak is a vehicle for your internal state. If your words are hurried, your thinking appears rushed. If your words are controlled, your thinking appears deliberate. Tone is as important as content. Flat, monotonous delivery is often mistaken for calm authority. But effective tone is subtle. It conveys weight without strain. It signals confidence without aggression. Pauses are your most powerful tool. A pause creates space for comprehension. It signals that what you just said matters. It gives others time to process, align, and respond. When you speak slowly, your presence expands. Your words are no longer fleeting sounds, they are signals. Others lean in. Attention follows deliberate pacing naturally. Weak language patterns also undermine authority. Phrases like "I think," "maybe," or "I'm not sure" signal hesitation. They betray internal uncertainty. Even if your mind is confident, these words create doubt externally. Influential speakers remove these patterns. They speak declaratively. They use simple, precise language. They avoid overqualifying statements. Here is a metaphor to anchor this lesson. Imagine a hammer striking a nail. A weak tap bends the nail or fails to penetrate. A measured, deliberate strike drives the nail straight, every time. Volume is the weak tap. Pacing, tone, and precision are the deliberate strike. The practical control shift begins now. Before speaking, take a single breath. Center your thought. Choose one word that conveys the essence of your message. Speak it deliberately. Pause. Then continue. This is not hesitation. This is calibration. It is a small, trainable behavior that recalibrates your influence immediately. Next, audit your language. Replace weak qualifiers with clear declarations. "I think we should proceed" becomes "we will proceed." "I'm not sure, but maybe" becomes "here is the plan." Each adjustment reinforces internal authority externally. Every pause signals confidence. Every deliberate word carries weight. Every measured tone communicates calm control. Identity lock-in. You are not someone who needs to raise their voice to be heard. You are someone whose words carry weight before volume is even considered. This is who you are now, a person who speaks with authority, not noise. Your presence, your pacing, your words, they are now instruments of influence. And the world responds accordingly. Chapter 7. The Language Patterns of Persuasion. You cannot lead others effectively if your words fail to carry weight. Most people assume persuasion comes from volume, charm, or clever arguments. They believe the louder, faster, or more passionate their speech, the more influence they hold. That assumption is false. Volume is not authority. Charm is not weight. Passion without structure is noise. The most common failure pattern is this. People attempt to persuade by overtly pushing their ideas. They explain too much, justify too often, and insist too firmly. They frame their suggestions as arguments. They emphasize logic alone. They ignore the subtle mechanisms by which humans adopt ideas. The result is resistance. Others feel pressured. They defend their position. They retreat from influence. Why does this happen? The mind is naturally skeptical of force. It reacts defensively to overt persuasion. Even if your argument is correct, the method of delivery triggers a subtle fight-or-flight response. Influential communicators do not battle resistance. They guide it. They understand that language is not a hammer. It is a channel. A method of planting ideas that others feel are their own. The professional reframe begins here. Words are not commands. They are vectors of thought. A single carefully placed phrase can steer perception. A well-structured question can direct thinking without triggering defense. Subtle implication often achieves more than explicit instruction. Here is the metaphor to anchor this concept. Language is water. Forceful speech is a torrent that erodes the bank but often splashes back. Strategic speech flows like a river. It follows contours, infiltrates channels, and shapes the landscape over time. This is not manipulation. It is precision. Influential people choose words that create alignment. They avoid weak language that undermines authority. They remove filler phrases like I think or maybe that dilute impact. They embrace declarative clarity tempered by tact. They also frame ideas in a way that allows others to adopt them naturally. For example, rather than stating, "We need to take action now," they may frame it as, "One approach we could consider that usually works is." Notice the difference. The second phrasing does not demand obedience. It allows the listener to internalize the idea as a personal choice. And when people internalize an idea as their own, adoption becomes effortless. Another subtle pattern is implication. Professionals often imply outcomes rather than declare them. Instead of saying, "This will succeed if you do it," they might say, "This approach often leads to success for people in similar situations." The effect is the same, but the listener's mind feels agency. Influence without resistance. The practical control shift is simple and trainable. Before speaking, frame your next idea in 3 steps. Remove force. Do not demand. Offer structure. Provide context or options. Imply outcome. Let the listener visualize success themselves. For practice, take one statement you normally give as an instruction today. Rewrite it using these 3 steps. Notice the difference in your internal tone. Notice how the words carry more authority without trying to dominate. Influence is not louder words. It is subtler intention. Every professional who persuades consistently does this. They do not argue to win. They guide to align. They use words as channels, not hammers. One more mental note. Pauses are part of persuasion. After stating a framed thought, pause. Do not fill silence. Let the listener process. The space allows the suggestion to settle, unforced. This is how language patterns create respect. Respect is not demanded. It is invited through precision, implication, and structure. Identity lock-in. You are no longer someone who persuades by pressure. You are someone who guides through clarity. You are someone who plants ideas in a way that others adopt naturally. Your words carry weight because your internal intention is steady. Your presence reinforces every phrase. This is not a technique. It is who you are now. You are a professional in thought and speech. Your influence flows quietly, strategically, and effectively. Chapter 8. Listening like a strategist. You cannot lead others effectively if you are not first capable of listening deeply. Most people believe communication is about talking. They equate influence with verbal output. They measure authority by how often they are heard. This is a misconception that limits potential. Great influencers speak less. They listen more. And they do so with intention. The most common failure pattern in communication is noise. People speak to fill silence. They speak to prove knowledge. They speak to convince before understanding. They interrupt. They jump to solutions. They respond impulsively. This pattern creates friction, misunderstanding, and resistance. Words become barriers rather than bridges. Their presence loses weight because others sense impatience. Psychologically, this happens because the mind confuses speaking with control. The nervous system equates silence with vulnerability. Social conditioning teaches people to assert dominance through volume or speed. But influence is rarely a product of aggression. It is the outcome of perception. And perception is shaped largely by what is noticed, and what is not. Leaders and professionals reframe this entirely. They listen to gather information. They listen to detect patterns. They listen to understand motivation, hesitation, and unspoken concerns. They treat conversation as intelligence gathering, not performance. They recognize that the person who dominates speech often reveals less than the one who observes. Their influence comes from awareness, not verbosity. Consider the metaphor of a chess player. The novice moves quickly, reacting to threats. The master observes, anticipates, and positions pieces deliberately. In conversation, the same principle applies. Listening is positioning. Every word heard, every pause noted, every subtle tone interpreted is a strategic advantage. To make listening actionable, begin with one control shift. Focus entirely on the speaker's message, verbal and nonverbal, without planning your response in advance. Notice the words they choose, the ones they avoid, and the energy behind them. Observe inconsistencies between what is said and what is felt. These are the signals that reveal true priorities, objections, and desires. Reading between the lines is not guessing. It is disciplined observation. The pause before a response, the shift in posture, the avoidance of certain topics, all communicate more than words alone. When you understand this, influence becomes a byproduct of attention. People feel understood because you are genuinely tracking their perspective. And when people feel understood, they are far more receptive to direction. Strategic listening turns conversation into leverage. Not through manipulation, but through alignment. You see where others resist. You identify where they are open. You adjust your communication to match, not to fight. This creates a subtle gravity. When someone speaks to you, they unconsciously calibrate to your attention and presence. Your quiet observation carries authority. The mental image to anchor this skill is that of a still lake. A calm, reflective surface mirrors what approaches it. The lake does not react violently to waves. It absorbs and reflects. Its power comes from its depth and composure. Your presence in conversation should function the same way. Your listening is the depth. Your response is the reflection. The practical control shift is simple yet profound. During every interaction, Restrain the impulse to immediately answer or comment. Allow a 2 to 3 second pause after someone finishes speaking. Use that time to register both the words and the underlying meaning. This pause is not hesitation. It is precision. It transforms reactive speaking into deliberate influence. With practice, people will notice the difference. They will feel that you are present, attentive, and thoughtful. They will reveal more than they intended. And you will respond with insight rather than reaction. This is not a skill to perform occasionally. It is a posture. It is a commitment to observing before acting, to understanding before asserting, to aligning before persuading. This is who you are becoming. A person whose influence grows not through noise, but through attention. A person whose words land because they emerge from comprehension, not compulsion. A person whose presence commands trust before a single sentence is spoken. You are no longer a participant in conversation. You are the strategist. And listening is your most powerful tool. Chapter 9: Emotional Control in High-Pressure Situations. You cannot lead others, or influence outcomes, if your mind and body react before your intention. Most people fail under pressure. Not because they lack intelligence. Not because they lack preparation, but because their nervous system hijacks their behavior. The pattern is familiar. Someone challenges them, disrespects them, threatens their ego or their authority, and instantly they react. They raise their voice. They justify. They argue. They seek to prove themselves. This reaction feels natural. It feels necessary. But it is destructive. Every reaction made under emotional duress erodes influence. Even if you win the argument, you lose perception. Even if you are right, you lose presence. This happens because the human brain is wired to prioritize threat over logic. The amygdala hijacks reasoning. Stress hormones spike. Muscles tense. Breathing changes. Your voice alters. Other people feel this shift immediately. They sense tension. They sense defensiveness. And they adjust, not in your favor. This is why emotional control is not optional. It is foundational. Professionals respond. Average people react. The difference is subtle but profound. Response is deliberate. Reaction is reflexive. When you respond, you observe. You pause. You measure the situation. You choose your words with precision. You use silence strategically. When you react, you speak first, feel later, and hope for a favorable outcome. Here is the metaphor that anchors this chapter. Emotional control is like water in a storm. The storm rages around you, wind, rain, pressure. The water does not fight. It flows. It adapts. It maintains its depth. And in doing so, it shapes the storm. Similarly, a person who maintains calm under pressure does not need to attack to dominate. They do not need to justify. They do not need to escalate. Silence becomes a tool. A pause becomes a signal of strength. A measured tone becomes authority. This is psychological dominance without aggression. It is not intimidation. It is not force. It is the quiet assertion of control through self-mastery. The common mistake is thinking that dominance requires volume or visible force. It does not. The brain of the observer, your team, your counterpart, your audience, registers calm first. Words second. Actions third. To build this skill, start with one trainable behavior, the controlled pause. When you feel the impulse to respond impulsively, do this. Inhale slowly. Exhale slowly. Count to 3 silently in your mind. During this pause, assess the situation. What is being said? What is the underlying intention? How will my words shape the outcome I desire? You are not avoiding confrontation. You are redirecting it from chaos to precision. This pause alone signals composure. It disrupts tension. It shifts the dynamic in your favor. Next, notice how silence functions. When someone challenges you, resisting the urge to fill every gap communicates strength. Silence is not emptiness. It is space where others reveal themselves. It allows them to confront their own position while you maintain control. People often feel compelled to over-explain when they are anxious. Let go of that need. Observe the effect of strategic silence. You will see that power resides in the absence of noise. Finally, understand that your emotional state is contagious. If you remain calm, others stabilize. If you remain composed, they hesitate to escalate. If you remain deliberate, they unconsciously align to your tempo. This is mastery in its purest form. Not through dominance or coercion, but through controlled presence. The practical control shift is simple. Train your body and mind to respond deliberately under pressure. Whenever stress arises, practice the following sequence. Ground your posture. Feet planted. Shoulders relaxed. Spine straight. Slow your breathing. 2 full cycles. Observe the situation. Separate facts from emotions. Choose one deliberate action or one measured statement. Use silence to fill gaps, not words. This sequence retrains your nervous system. Repetition turns response into habit. Habit turns presence into authority. When you consistently practice this, you become unshakable. Challenges no longer intimidate. Disrespect no longer triggers reflex. High-pressure situations become opportunities for influence. This is not a skill for occasional use. It is an identity shift. You are not someone who reacts under pressure. You are someone who responds with composure. You are someone whose authority is felt, not claimed. You are someone whose presence quiets chaos rather than joining it. This is who you are becoming. And from this place, influence is no longer effortful. It is inevitable. Chapter 10. Speaking to different personality types. You cannot lead effectively if you assume everyone processes information the same way you do. Most people communicate as though their way of thinking is universal. They speak rapidly, give long explanations, or emphasize points that matter to them personally. They expect understanding and alignment, without realizing the listener's mind operates differently. This is why influence fails. You are not misunderstood because your message lacks value. You are misunderstood because your style does not match the receiver's cognitive patterns. The common failure pattern is predictable. People try to persuade others using their preferred mode of communication. Analytical people over-explain with data. Emotional people over-relate with stories. Action-oriented people push for immediate decisions. In every case, resistance emerges, not because the idea is bad, but because the method of delivery conflicts with the listener's internal processing style. Most people notice this too late. They double down. They repeat, argue, or raise volume. They treat misunderstanding as opposition. This escalates tension. It fractures influence. The psychological explanation is clear. The human brain filters information through deeply ingrained patterns. Some individuals prioritize logic. Some prioritize feelings. Some prioritize speed and efficiency. When information is presented in a misaligned way, the brain triggers a defensive response. It perceives friction, not value. It disengages, debates internally, or outright rejects the message. Influential communicators do not fight this resistance. They work with it. They recognize that alignment, not force, creates cooperation. They adjust their tone, pace, structure, and content to match the listener's cognitive style. They meet the mind where it is, rather than where they want it to be. Consider the professional reframe. Leaders speak differently to different audiences. They are not inconsistent. They are precise. To the analytical mind, they provide clear reasoning, data, and logical frameworks. To the emotional mind, they connect with values, stories, and relational significance. To the action-oriented mind, they deliver decisive options, with clear next steps and minimal delay. They avoid forcing comprehension. Instead, they shape the environment so the listener processes information naturally. Here is the metaphor that anchors this lesson. Think of communication as a river. Water flows easily when the channel aligns with the landscape. If the river encounters obstacles, it overflows, erodes, or stagnates. Your words are the water. The listener's mind is the landscape. If you ignore the shape of the channel, your influence floods, breaks banks, or evaporates. If you adapt to the terrain, your words flow smoothly and reach their destination. The practical control shift is simple, trainable, and immediate. Before speaking, identify the listener's processing style. Observe pace, questions, emphasis, and priorities. Then mirror and align. If analytical, frame statements logically, step by step. If emotional, frame statements relationally, showing impact or significance. If action-oriented, frame statements with clarity, options, and direction. This is not manipulation. It is calibration. The small adjustment shifts influence from friction to flow. People stop resisting. They engage naturally. They adopt ideas as if they discovered them themselves. One pause and one observation can prevent hours of misunderstanding. This is the single behavioral shift that separates average communicators from professionals. Identity lock-in. You are no longer someone who forces agreement. You are someone who aligns the minds of others through observation, patience, and strategic adaptation. Your words now travel through channels carved for understanding. Resistance diminishes. Influence grows naturally. This is who you are becoming. A precise, adaptive, and effective communicator. A professional whose influence flows, rather than collides. Chapter 11. The Power of Strategic Silence. You cannot influence others effectively if you are afraid of silence. Most people fill every pause, every gap, every quiet moment with words. They fear the emptiness of stillness. They mistake silence for weakness. They believe that to be heard, they must always speak. This is a common failure pattern. When conversations slow, most people panic. They rush to respond, often over-explaining or apologizing unnecessarily. They interrupt the natural rhythm of dialogue. They reveal more than they should. They give others the power over their own presence. Silence is not absence. It is a tool, a psychological lever. When used intentionally, silence creates tension. It commands attention. It unsettles those who assume they must dominate. It amplifies whatever you do choose to say. The reason most people fail with silence is simple. They are uncomfortable with themselves. Their nervous systems equate stillness with vulnerability. Their minds interpret the pause as a gap to fill, rather than a space to project authority. Social conditioning trains them to respond quickly, rather than strategically. Leaders, by contrast, understand the physiology of influence. They pause. They do not rush to fill gaps. They allow silence to carry weight. A pause does several things simultaneously. It signals thoughtfulness. It signals control. It allows others to reveal their position, their intentions, or their insecurities. The metaphor is simple. Silence is the frame around a painting. The image, the words, the decisions, the actions, becomes more striking because of the space around it. Without silence, even the most important statement loses impact. The practical control shift is immediate. Next time someone asks a question, instead of answering immediately, pause for a full 3 seconds. Observe the effect. Notice how people shift, how they lean in, how they project their own words into the gap. This pause is not hesitation. It is intentional. It signals that you are in control of your thoughts, and that your words are measured, not reactive. Silence is also a diagnostic tool. When you stop talking, you give others room to speak. They reveal motivations, intentions, and vulnerabilities that are invisible when you dominate the dialogue. You begin to gather information without asking overtly. You gain leverage without confrontation. Another common mistake is speaking too soon in negotiations, meetings, or difficult conversations. Leaders often allow others to exhaust themselves with words first. They wait for the emotional or logical noise to settle. Only then do they speak, and their words carry more authority. Pauses can also be layered. A short pause after a question, a slightly longer pause before a decision, and a silent moment after a statement. Each pause shapes perception, creating weight behind every phrase. People do not notice the exact length of silence, but they feel the effect. This is not manipulation. It is physics. It is the way attention flows. Energy moves toward the void you create. The single behavior to train immediately is simple. Pause intentionally before every response. Even one breath. Even two. Observe. Then speak. This teaches your nervous system that your voice carries intention, not reaction. It teaches others that you are not hurried, not anxious, not desperate for agreement. It transforms conversation into a tool of influence rather than a channel of reflex. Identity lock-in is subtle but profound. You are no longer someone who rushes to fill silence. You are someone who understands the weight of words. You are someone who shapes conversations by presence as much as by content. You are someone who listens, observes, and commands attention without raising your voice. Strategic silence is not about withdrawing. It is about asserting. It is not emptiness. It is control. It is influence made visible through restraint. Your presence begins to expand into the space around you. Your words become heavier. Your authority becomes evident not because you dominate the conversation, but because you allow the conversation to reveal itself while you remain grounded. This is who you are becoming. A person whose influence does not need noise. A person whose calm, measured silence carries more weight than others' hurried words. A person whose presence is felt before speech begins. And once you master this, every conversation, every negotiation, every interaction becomes an opportunity to exert quiet, deliberate influence. This is not a technique. This is your new standard. Chapter 12. Framing reality to influence outcomes. You cannot influence effectively until you understand that reality is not fixed. Most people believe truth is absolute. They assume facts alone will persuade. They think problems are obstacles to remove, rather than perspectives to manage. This is a critical error. Influence begins with framing. How you present reality shapes how others perceive it. People do not respond to the world as it is. They respond to the world as they interpret it. The most common failure pattern is rigid thinking. People see challenges as threats. Setbacks feel like personal failures. Conflict appears as opposition. Because of this, they communicate defensively. They react emotionally. They limit their own influence by allowing perception to dictate action. It is not that they are dishonest. It is that they have never distinguished between reality and perspective. Psychologically, the mind filters every event through emotion, past experience, and bias. Two people can witness the same incident and experience entirely different realities. This is not subjective weakness, it is human nature. Your influence either works with this tendency or fights it, and fighting it always fails. Professionals understand this principle deeply. They do not manipulate facts. They do not lie. They structure reality so that others perceive solutions, options, and opportunities where chaos once appeared. Consider how leaders frame setbacks. A failed project is not a disaster. It is a lesson. A misstep is not a problem. It is a pivot point. The language, tone, and pacing all convey a narrative that guides perception. This is the leader's reframe. A metaphor anchors this clearly. Reality is a mirror. It reflects not just what exists, but what you show it. If you approach it with panic, the mirror fractures. If you approach it with composure, the reflection becomes orderly. Your framing shapes how others see the reflection, and thus how they respond. The practical control shift is simple, but transformative. Before responding to any situation, pause. Ask yourself, how can this problem be presented as an opportunity? Do not invent outcomes. Do not distort facts. Simply position your perspective so that solutions are highlighted over obstacles. For example, a team misses a deadline. Most managers react with frustration, blame, or alarm. A strategic influencer reframes. We now have a clearer understanding of the bottlenecks. This allows us to improve our process and deliver better results next time. Notice the difference. The facts have not changed. The project is still late. But the perception has shifted. Energy moves from resistance to alignment. You can extend this principle to communication beyond problems. The way you describe goals, challenges, or even daily choices influences how others participate. Framing is subtle, yet it directs behavior. Equally important is controlling the narrative without deception. Influence is not about bending truth. It is about guiding attention. By choosing which aspects of a situation to emphasize, and which to allow space for reflection, you shape perception ethically and effectively. This requires discipline. Random framing, exaggeration, or spin will backfire. Influence grows from consistent perspective, not manipulation. Another common mistake is assuming others interpret events as you do. People carry their own assumptions. They filter information through fear, desire, and habit. A skilled influencer anticipates these filters. They choose language and structure that aligns perception with the intended outcome. This is where patience matters. You do not push reality. You guide it. You create conditions where people arrive at the desired understanding on their own. The mental imagery to solidify this skill. Imagine a lens. Every message you deliver is focused through this lens. Your lens can magnify clarity, soften conflict, or sharpen opportunity. How you tilt and adjust the lens determines what others see, and how they act. To practice immediately, identify one current problem or challenge. Write down the facts objectively. Then rewrite the situation, framing it as an opportunity or a solution pathway. Do not exaggerate. Do not invent. Simply adjust the perspective to highlight potential, resourcefulness, or constructive action. Deliver your next communication using this frame. Observe how it changes responses. Notice how people align, rather than resist. This is not manipulation. This is the discipline of influence. It is the difference between reacting to chaos and guiding it. Between surrendering perception and shaping it. Identity lock-in. You are no longer someone who reacts blindly to events. You are someone who observes, interprets, and guides reality with precision. You do not control everything, but you control how you present it. Your words, your pacing, your framing, all carry weight because they emerge from deliberate thought. This is influence at its highest level, subtle, quiet, and undeniable. Not because you demand attention, but because you structure perception so that others naturally follow your insight. You are not merely a participant in reality. You are a strategist within it. And this is who you are now. Chapter 13. Handling Objections and Resistance. You cannot influence others effectively if you crumble under resistance. Most people assume objections are barriers to be overcome with more argument, more facts, or louder insistence. This is a misconception. Resistance is not a logical problem. It is a psychological signal. When someone objects, hesitates, or pushes back, they are communicating internal tension, fear, or misalignment, not the inadequacy of your words. They are revealing their state of mind. The common failure pattern is predictable. People respond to resistance with urgency. They defend themselves. They over-explain. They repeat points they assume were missed. This is not strategy. It is reaction. Every explanation, every defensive word, signals insecurity. It confirms the resistance they are already feeling. The psychological explanation is simple. Human beings resist when they feel pressure, threat, or loss of control. Cognitive biases, social conditioning, and emotional triggers make immediate agreement unlikely if your approach threatens the other person's identity, autonomy, or comfort. When you push logic without first establishing psychological safety, your arguments fall on deaf ears. The brain prioritizes self-protection over reason. This is why debating facts rarely produces compliance or influence. Disciplined professionals respond differently. They do not view resistance as a problem to solve with speech. They view it as information to process. Resistance is a signal, not an obstacle. Calm influencers first stabilize themselves. They regulate their nervous system. They maintain posture, breathing, and tone. Their calmness becomes a framework within which the other person can adjust. The metaphor here is the river. Objections are stones in the water. Push against them forcefully, and the current splashes back, creating turbulence. Flow around them calmly, and the water continues in your direction. You do not destroy the stones. You redirect the energy. The practical control shift is straightforward but profound. When you encounter resistance, pause. Do not react verbally immediately. A single breath, a measured nod, or reflective silence allows you to reframe the interaction. Use this pause to recontextualize the objection. Ask a clarifying question internally. What is this resistance protecting? What does it reveal about the other person's needs? Then respond not with force, but with alignment. Mirror their concerns subtly. Acknowledge it mentally or aloud without agreement or judgment. These signals understanding. It diffuses defensiveness. For example, if someone says, "I'm not sure this will work," the reflexive response is to argue. A calm influencer reframes. "I hear your concern. Let's explore how it could work in a way that feels safe." Notice the difference. The first approach escalates tension. The second contains tension. The first confronts psychologically. The second collaborates strategically. At all times, maintain composure. Your emotional regulation sets the standard for the interaction. When you remain steady, others often mirror your calm. They begin to consider your perspective without pressure. Influence through resistance is not about winning the argument. It is about guiding the perception. It is about turning objections into agreements by reframing the psychological context. The power of suggestion lies in subtlety. Words should imply solutions, not demand acceptance. The art is in allowing the other person to arrive at the conclusion themselves. This is the identity shift. You are no longer someone who must convince. You are someone who positions outcomes so that agreement becomes natural. Objections are not enemies. Resistance is not a test of will. They are signals that reveal the path to alignment. This is who you are becoming. A calm strategist. A professional who transforms pushback into collaboration without forcing, arguing, or escalating. When you integrate this approach, you will notice a profound change. People stop resisting aggressively. They begin to lean into your guidance. Conversations become less about defending positions and more about exploring possibilities. This is not manipulation. It is mastery. And mastery always begins internally. Your influence is not measured by how many objections you overcome, but by how composed you remain while shaping perception. This is not a technique. It is your standard. Your posture. Your presence. You are now someone who turns resistance into clarity, objection into agreement, conflict into subtle influence. And from this calm authority, you will act. Without urgency. Without reaction. With precision. This is the invisible art of handling resistance. It is quiet. intentional, irrefutable. It is who you are. Chapter 14. Becoming internally powerful. You cannot lead externally until you lead internally. Influence begins not with strategy, not with clever language, and not with recognition from others. It begins with self-respect. It begins with a calm conviction in who you are, independent of outside validation. Most people fail to influence because they outsource their confidence. They wait for approval. They seek recognition. They measure their worth through others' eyes. This is the most common failure pattern. When your sense of value depends on external acknowledgement, every objection shakes you. Every challenge unsettles you. Every disagreement triggers tension. Your presence becomes fragmented. Your words lose weight. You may not notice it consciously, but others feel it. Your nervous system broadcasts insecurity. Your influence erodes before you even speak. Psychologically, this happens because the human mind is wired to seek safety. We are conditioned to align with those around us to avoid rejection. This instinct served survival once, but in social and professional contexts, it diminishes authority. External approval becomes a crutch, and influence collapses the moment it is withheld. Leaders behave differently. They understand that confidence is cultivated internally, not externally. They establish self-respect first. They validate themselves. They honor their own boundaries and values. They detach from the need to be liked or validated. This detachment does not create arrogance. It creates presence. The metaphor to hold here is that of a mountain. A mountain does not adjust itself because the wind blows. It does not seek approval from the clouds. It stands steady, immovable, commanding attention by its very existence. Your internal power functions the same way. It is immovable. It does not fluctuate with opinion. It radiates authority simply through its stability. The practical control shift begins with one simple exercise. Identify one area in your life where you seek approval unnecessarily. Notice when you adjust your tone, your actions, or your decisions based on someone else's potential reaction. Pause. And choose instead to act from your own standards. Do this consistently. Each time you detach from approval, you reclaim internal authority. Each time you align your behavior with your principles instead of external expectations, your presence strengthens. This internal alignment is inseparable from influence. People do not trust those who bend with every reaction. They follow those who remain anchored, even under pressure. Confidence is built through repetition, not performance. You do not become internally powerful by declaring it aloud. You become it by consistently demonstrating it internally. Through small, disciplined choices. Through control over your reactions. Through calm consistency. Notice how subtle this is. No one may announce your authority, but it will be felt. In meetings. In conversations. In every interaction where composure matters. Unshakable presence is not a mask. It is a product of inner order. When your internal state is steady, your voice gains weight. Your pauses carry significance. Your gaze commands attention without effort. Your influence becomes automatic. Begin by observing your inner dialogue. Notice when it wavers, when it doubts, when it seeks validation. Replace the impulse to appease with the choice to stand firm. This is not an abstract exercise. It is behavioral training, and it compounds over time. You will make mistakes. You will feel uncertain. You will be tempted to revert to approval seeking. Do not resist the discomfort. Lean into it. Discomfort signals growth. With practice, your influence will shift from conditional to inherent. People will follow you not because you impress them, but because you do not need to. Your authority will no longer be borrowed, it will be yours. You are now becoming someone who carries self-respect as a standard, not a privilege. Someone whose confidence originates from internal alignment, not applause. Someone whose presence is steady, regardless of external turbulence. This is not a technique. It is who you are now. An internally powerful individual. A quiet force that draws attention and earns respect naturally. Every interaction, every decision, every word now flows from this foundation. You are no longer a reactor. You are an anchor. A presence that does not shift for approval. A mind that does not crumble under pressure. This is internal power. And it is the cornerstone of lasting influence. You are ready. You are grounded. You are unshakable. Chapter 15. Living as a quiet influencer. You are not here to be recognized. You are here to be effective. True influence does not crave validation. It does not need applause, acknowledgement, or approval. Those who lead quietly understand a simple truth. The world reacts to stability, not performance. Most people fail in influence because they chase recognition. They try to impress, to be liked, to be seen as clever. Their energy is transactional. Their presence conditional. And because it is conditional, people feel it and resist. Emotion, desire for approval, and urgency push average people to over-explain, overperform, and overextend. They think influence is achieved in moments. They mistake attention for authority. Psychologically, this is a trap. When you depend on external validation, you react. Every pushback becomes personal. Every silence becomes threatening. Every disagreement triggers tension. The quiet influencer reacts differently. They do not need affirmation to maintain their posture. They anchor themselves internally. They allow others' responses to pass through without losing their center. Their energy is not borrowed from others. It is self-supplied. This internal supply is built through consistency and character. Consistency is not repetition without purpose. It is disciplined action aligned with principle. People notice not your words, but your patterns. Reliability creates trust faster than persuasion ever can. Character, what you do when no one is watching, is the magnet that draws others to follow naturally. The metaphor here is simple. Influence is like a river. A river shapes the landscape quietly over time. It does not shout at stones or demand obedience. It flows consistently. It navigates obstacles with patience. It carves valleys not through force, but through persistence. Short-term persuasion is a storm. Loud, noticeable, and temporary. It may move some things, but its effects dissipate. Long-term influence is the river. Invisible at first. Slow. Unyielding. Irresistible in its cumulative effect. To live as a quiet influencer, your control shift is this. Detach your self-worth from response. When you speak, act, or decide, measure your success by alignment, not reaction. Are you consistent with your principles? Are your actions deliberate and calm? Not whether someone praises or acknowledges you. Practice this consciously in small interactions. Do not correct every misstep around you. Do not chase agreement. Observe, respond intentionally, and maintain your internal rhythm. You will notice that influence expands naturally when it is not forced. People begin to follow without realizing why. They seek your opinion, trust your judgment, and defer to your decisions. They do not do this because you told them to. They do this because your presence has weight. Your actions have integrity. Your decisions have consistency. Another aspect of quiet influence is understanding time. Most people measure power in immediate outcomes. They demand rapid results. They overreact when others resist. They confuse temporary compliance with lasting influence. Leaders think in terms of months, years, and decades. Every interaction is a deposit in credibility. Every consistent action compounds. Every demonstration of self-mastery accrues invisible authority. There is no shortcut. There is no performance that replaces internal alignment. The final mindset shift is simple, yet profound. Stop thinking about who follows you. Start thinking about who you are becoming. Influence is not a trophy. It is a reflection. It mirrors the stability, discipline, and character you embody. When you refine your internal state, your speech, and your actions, the world naturally aligns. Quiet influencers do not speak to dominate. They do not react to insult. They do not measure themselves against others. They lead through presence, through consistency, through patience. And over time, others begin to follow, not because they are compelled, but because it feels natural. Here is the anchoring metaphor. You are a lighthouse. You do not chase ships. You do not demand their attention. You stand firm, emitting steady light. Those who navigate by your light adjust their course. And they do so willingly. The practical control shift is simple. Every day, identify one action you take purely because it aligns with your principles, not because anyone will notice. One decision. One communication. One interaction. Observe the effect internally. Measure your success by your alignment, not by others' responses. Repeat this daily. Your internal consistency will eventually manifest externally. Your character will become visible through your actions. Your influence will become natural and unshakable. You are not performing. You are embodying. This is not a skill you apply temporarily. It is a standard you live by. By living as a quiet influencer, you achieve what loud persuasion cannot. Presence that commands respect. Authority that is unspoken. Leadership that is unquestioned. This is your final identity lock-in. You are no longer someone who seeks approval. You are someone who leads through consistency and character. You are a river shaping the landscape. You are a lighthouse guiding silently, steadily, inevitably. This is who you are now. This is influence in its purest form. This is how professionals live. You are ready. Not for recognition. Not for applause. But for impact. And that impact will be quiet, intentional, lasting. You have now completed this journey through thinking, speaking, and influencing like a professional. Remember, influence begins within. It is cultivated through clarity, calm, consistency, and character. It is not measured by applause, recognition, or immediate results, but by the quiet shifts you create in the world around you. Carry these principles into every conversation, every decision, and every action. Let your presence, your words, and your discipline speak for you. Lead without needing validation. Influence without force. And act with precision, integrity, and patience. If you found value in this training, consider subscribing to continue this journey with us. Your likes and comments help us understand what topics resonate most and allow us to create more content that supports your growth and mastery. Return to these lessons as often as needed. Repetition builds mastery. And mastery builds influence that is lasting, quiet, and undeniable. Step forward now as someone who thinks clearly, speaks deliberately, and influences naturally. This is your standard. This is your identity. This is your power.